I have 2 university degrees. I was a lawyer. I had it all. There had been an attempt on my life. I was involved with some really scary people that I knew were going missing. I had to go for trial for trafficking and proceeds of crime. I was a lawyer. I basically was in my house packing suitcases. I decided that I was going to move to another province. I knew that there was police officers outside of my house. I was done. I walked outside and I'm like, let's go. I'm ready to have this over with. I need to find a different way to live.
All right, that was tonight's guest, Nicole Obrigavitch. Oh my God. I didn't practice before the show. Obrigavitch, thank you. Oh, I just smacked myself with the microphone. I'm Daniel Unmanageable. This is Hard Knox Talks, coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty Number 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Let's bring in Nicole. Nicole, how are you?
Hi. I'm good.
So I've already made the mistakes. You can relax now. I said your name totally wrong, even though we practiced it, didn't we? You and me, we practiced it.
I think it was my bad because I gave you 2 different ways of saying it, and so I should have just stuck with the Canadian version.
No, you're right. It's totally your fault. I agree.
My bad.
So anyways, thank you for joining us tonight. Is there anything that you would like to say before we jump in tonight?
I mentioned this to you before we started tonight. It's just really weird to me when I share my story how different pieces of it come up every time. And I just wanted to mention that it's been really weird for me for the past couple weeks because I just recently moved back to Saskatoon from British Columbia. I was released from prison in BC, and I've been living there for the past 8 years. And there's an opportunity for me to come back to Saskatchewan to work with Elizabeth Fry. A couple people sent me the job posting, and I just thought it was a really good opportunity to come back. And I hadn't been back since I was standing in my driveway in handcuffs, and it was pretty weird to come into the city, but in a good way. And I'm gonna try really hard not to say because I say a lot.
Yeah,
Dan, you told me that.
Well, I did, but I with love.
I know it's a nervous tick because regardless of how many times I share my story, there's still parts of it that are difficult for me. And so, I get a little bit nervous.
That's okay. We'll get this handled. Okay. Having said that, let's go.
This is Hard Knox Talks.
Okay. Before we dive in, I just want to let our viewers and listeners know that tonight's live production is title sponsored by the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan, helping women before, during, and after incarceration. To learn more about them, check out www.elizabethfrysask.org. So, where do we even begin? We learned a little bit about you in the intro there. We talked a little bit about... You were a lawyer, but it wasn't all roses before that for you either, though. I mean, you came up in some challenging situations. Why don't we start there? Why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell us about what it was like growing up?
I feel like I kind of had 2 lives in a way. I grew up in Dundurn, a small community outside of Saskatoon. I had a really close, tight-knit family, very supportive, very hardworking, but also work hard, play hard. So I grew up in a community where people, like I said, worked really hard, but also partied quite a bit as well. I think the first time that I used substances, I was 12 years old. The first time I used to get drunk, I was 12 years old. Mm-hmm. And that was acceptable during that period of time. And I think it was also acceptable in my family, which... And I have to say this, and with all the love in the world, my family they weren't necessarily alcoholics, or drinking was just part of I guess it was just part of the lifestyle in small town Saskatchewan. I don't know if it's as bad as it was when I was younger, but it was really a thing when I was growing up. And so the one thing that I did learn from that was when you were happy, you drank. When you were sad, you drink. And that's basically how you coped. So I didn't have a lot of really great coping mechanisms, and I didn't grow up with my mom and my dad, because my mom had me when she was 18 years old, and her and my dad split really young. Ended up living with my great grandparents, who were absolutely amazing people, and back and forth between my mom's and also with my dad a bit, who lived in Vancouver. And my dad introduced me to drugs at the age of 15. And I
hang on a
moved
minute
out
now.
to Vancouver.
Hang on. Whoa. Hang on now. You're going like a freight train here. Let's just take a breath here for just a second. Let me get comfy.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about that. Now you just like you said that like it was just like that's your story, right? What are the circumstances around that? So you're like, your dad introduced you to drugs. Like, what was that like? Were you like, yeah, give me those things? Or were you hesitant? Like, did you think that was normal, or was that bad to you, or what?
And that's what I meant by having like sort of two lives from the very beginning. I had this really stable, hardworking, grit of the earth side of the family, and then my dad. And my dad was one of 9 kids, first generation in Canada. On my mom's side, 8th generation. My dad had really unhealthy coping mechanisms, and he moved to Vancouver when I was 12. And he was living with his brother, who had been incarcerated for drugs. And I went out to Vancouver for the summer when I was 15, and they just partied. That's what they did. And I think that since he hadn't been parenting, he didn't really think it was a big deal to, include me with them using. So, I started using when I was 15 with my dad. He introduced me to marijuana at first, and then I ended up staying out in Vancouver with him, and he also introduced me to cocaine soon after that as well. So I lived in Vancouver, and not necessarily with my dad, because he was partying so much. There was no stability there. And so I ended up kind of living on the streets, and I ended up going back to Saskatchewan when I was 19, and back to Dundurn, and back to some stability. So it was, a few years of partying. I worked at a bar, lots of drinking, that sort of thing.
Where were you staying?
Using drugs. I stayed with my grandparents for a while. I had my own apartment for a while. I actually was out for supper with someone last night. We were talking about my apartment when I was 19. Like, lots of partying, lots of crazy stuff. Like I said, I worked at a bar. So, I was using substances every day. And I feel like that sort of was my lifestyle, basically, from the time, 12 to 15, not so much. I was taking booze to school. Pretty much from 15 on, I used almost every day. Came back to Saskatchewan, and when I was 21, I decided that I wanted to have a baby. So got pregnant, and that provided me a little bit of stability at the beginning, because I took that very seriously. And because of my child, I ended up applying to go to university as a mature student. I only had a grade 10 because of the way that I was living between the time I was 15 and 19. So I applied to university to go to school as a mature student. I was also, during that period of time, employed at another nonprofit in town doing outreach work. And that was a really good opportunity for me, because it gave me some exposure to service and helping the community. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. So I got a sociology degree with a minor in Indigenous studies, and then I decided that I wanted to go to law school. So I
Wow.
applied to law school as a mature student, and
So
I got into law school.
where did that come from? Like, why law school? Was that something that you grew up
Okay,
wanting to do, or?
so yeah, pretty much when I was about 12 years old, I decided I wanted to go to law school. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it was because I like to argue a lot. But no, that's not why. It was because I knew that if you wanted to affect any real change in society, that you basically had to become like a judge or a lawyer or somebody that had effect on changing laws.
Mhm.
And the Constitution was something that was really interesting to me. And I know that sounds so bizarre, but it was always really interesting to me. So I applied to law school and got into law school. And right before I got into law school, I married somebody that I had known since I was 14 years old. We were really good friends, but we also partied together
Mhm.
a lot of drinking and partying together. And yeah, partying every day. Got into law school. I buckled down. Took that pretty seriously because I knew that that's what I wanted to do as a career. I was still partying on the weekends. Had
So
another baby.
so you were able to put a cap on it during the week. So you said you were partying, using every day, then you get into law school, and you're able to put a
Yeah.
cap on it. So there was still some control at this point in your life. What was it like when you weren't using? Like, were you irritable and bad, or what was that like?
I don't know if I was not necessarily irritable because I had a lot of responsibilities. I had a 5-year old. I had a brand new baby. Law school is no joke. Undergrad, I did a lot of screwing around, but law school, you had to take it pretty seriously. And my new husband also had it became evident really soon that his drinking was a lot different than mine because he was drinking every day and he would disappear for like days at a time, and there was like some emotional abuse going on at that point. And so that part wasn't very good, but I put a cap on it just because I had to. And that said, the weekend I was loaded all weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty unhappy, but ended up getting articles in Vancouver, and we moved to Vancouver. And I had started using hard drugs right before we went to Vancouver. And basically, when we got there, our marriage was falling apart even more. And he got in a car accident, and he wasn't able to work. He was dabbling in dealing drugs a little bit at that point, and he had been dealing drugs before we got married. But he said that he was going to quit when we got married. But unfortunately, he didn't like to work. So knowing that we had to pay bills, I let him do that a little bit. And so I got exposed to that lifestyle while I was in law school. And then when we moved to Vancouver, the marriage started falling apart more, and I started using more. And I did manage to keep my shit together for several years, despite the fact that I was drinking every day. And the hard drugs, it was generally a weekend thing, and then it became a Thursday to Sunday thing, and then it
Mm-hmm.
became a Thursday to Monday thing, and then it became an everyday thing. And you and I talked about this before, but I, was doing lines in the bathroom before court.
So at what
And
point, did this feel like normal to you at the time? Like, did you think that this was okay, or at this time you're like, this is wrong, like, but I can't
no,
stop?
yeah, I knew it was wrong. And what's worse is I also knew that I was using basically to cope with the fact that I was in an abusive marriage, because at this point things had started to get physical. And because I had moved to BC, I was very far away from my family, and nobody really knew what was going on with me. And I didn't feel like I could reach out for any sort of support at all.
Mm-hmm.
And because we were having financial problems, I started taking cash from some of my clients. and doing things on weekends and that sort of thing, not great. But I had a fee splitting agreement with the partners of my firm. And instead of giving them their half of the fees, I was keeping all of the fees. As a lawyer, you have a trust account and all your money is supposed to go through a trust account. And I was actually taking cash from clients. I don't know how I was actually able to keep practicing law, but I was practicing law and I was doing well. Like, I was winning. I have published decisions in the federal court. And I thought that piece, right. I thought that piece, I was handling it until I ended up getting a job as a prosecutor. And when I switched from my firm to prosecution, that's when things really fell apart, because I got sanctioned by the Law Society for my billing practices. And I was using so much that I decided that I just didn't give a shit. And I went to the beginning, the first part, the fact finding portion of my Law Society hearing, and then I didn't go to the second part, the sentencing part. They were only going to suspend me for 30 days, and instead they disbarred me.
Let's take a break here. Let's take a break here and look at some comments. But before we do that, let's just finish. Let me finish this thought. So if you would have showed up that day, they would have only given you a 30-day suspension.
Right. But let's be honest, Dan. If they would have given me a 30-day suspension, I would have had another sanction within months, because I was using heavily.
Yeah.
Heavily.
Yeah.
At that point.
Okay. Let's look at some comments. Let's see what we got here. We have. You reading comments?
If you'd like me to.
I would.
So I'm just going to start at the first one from Higgy. He says, Nicole Obrigavitch has been such a blessing in my journey. Did I say it right?
Obrigavitch.
Obrigavitch. I'm so sorry. And then next comment is from Corey. Thanks for your comment, Corey. He says, I was smoking weed at the age of 8, playing Mega Man with my uncle and brother. That's pretty young.
Yeah.
And our good friend Barb tuning in here with Law Nerds Are Rad.
Everything's rad when you're Barb.
Yeah. And Joa Timothy Barnes, thanks for the comment, says, Vancouver is crazy. I just moved back to Arkansas from Portland. I lived up that way for a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Corey Allen would like to share that the Serenity Prayer is a huge prayer in my life, gets me through my days sober, and I'm very appreciative for the sober community displayed in my life. And Sober Now says, I understand. I numbed in the same way for the same reason. And this comment came up when you were talking about the domestic issues that you were facing.
Yeah. Okay. So
I just want to ask Nicole a quick question here. And this is kind of in part because of the recent op-ed that we did. It was I don't know if you're familiar with it, but a lawyer, probably familiar with the case. He claims to have had a $50,000 a week habit. So my sort of question is, did any of your colleagues kind of take note, or did you ever sense that people were aware or suspecting anything?
That I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I meant to mention this. When I was talking about not being able to talk to my family and reach out for supports in that way, I think that what was equally devastating for me was that I wasn't able to reach out to my colleagues. The partners in my firm, they had to know something was going on, because there was one time where I didn't actually come to work for 2 weeks, and nobody even called to see where I was or anything like that. I was showing up with bruises. I had a black eye one time. And, the thing was that I was embarrassed that was happening to me. And what's worse, I was embarrassed that I was using drugs to cope.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So having a little bit of a legal background, like does BC have anything like Saskatchewan where we have lawyers concerned for lawyers? Is there anything like that?
So, in between the fact finding piece of my Law Society hearing and the sentencing piece, they did send me to the Lawyers Assistance Plan, but they gave me a male counselor. And since I was in an abusive relationship, I just didn't really feel like I could talk to him. And so that made things, I think, almost worse. So, yeah.
Hmm.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Nicole. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets worse.
Yeah. So, okay. So what happened next? I mean, you get disbarred. Like that must have been a rough day.
Right.
Tell us
Yeah,
about what happened next.
So since I was using drugs to numb, I was so out of it all of the time. I couldn't even get out of bed. There was a point where I didn't leave the house for 3 months. When I found out that I was disbarred, I tried to commit suicide. At that point, social services came in and took my children from me. And they went to their grandparents for a little while, and the drug use continued.
Did they try to offer you any services?
Oh, God, no.
Or did they just come in and take the kids and say...
They took the kids, and then they wanted me to go to detox, and eventually I got into detox. But this was like over a couple of years' time, because it didn't happen all at once. I got the kids back at one point for a while. And then we got evicted from our house, and then social services showed up again, and they wanted a hair strand test, and they wanted me to go to detox, and I went to detox, and then I couldn't get into treatment for 6 months. And when I did get into treatment 6 months later, I was already heavily using again, and I had switched drugs. My husband had gotten a prescription for OxyContin, so we started using opiates at that point. And I think that everything absolutely fell apart after that. Started doing some really low bottom addict sorts of behaviors, like stealing catalytic converters and Home Depot scams and stuff like that. And we didn't have a stable housing situation at all. We were kind of couch surfing at this point, and just kind of around wherever we could get dope and that. And I finally decided that I wanted to come back to Saskatchewan. So I ended up borrowing money from my grandma so that I could come back to Saskatchewan. It literally took us like a month to get the U-Haul packed because we were so absolutely high and out of it. Mm-hmm. And our relationship was just such a nightmare, like so toxic, and, pounding the crap out of each other. And came back to Saskatchewan, and I thought that I would have some supports from my family, but my family was over my shit at that point. They knew that I was messed up because I was phoning my cousin. I felt really, when I finally got out of my stupor, I felt so bad for some of the things that I had done. And it was understandable. They told me that if I showed up at my grandma's, that they would call the cops on me.
Wow.
And, now I totally understand why they would have done that, because things had gotten so absolutely out of hand. So we came back to Saskatoon, and the plan was initially that we were going to straighten out because there wasn't heroin here. But unfortunately, I think we were here for only like a month or two. And then we were approached and asked if we would start bringing meth into the city. So we started bringing quantity of meth into town, and that spiraled out of control really quickly. And we ended up getting evicted out of where we were living, and we broke up finally, and I picked up drug dealing on my own. Previous to that, it was mostly my husband and me just using, but I had to deal if I wanted to keep using, survival dealing. So I started out, selling small quantities, but I knew a lot of people, and I'm always sort of on some next level stuff. And so I built my business and ended up meeting some people that were willing to provide me quantity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was also linked somewhat to the fact that there was an attempt made on my life in 2012, and I refused to talk to the police about it. I wouldn't tell them who it was that attacked me, and I knew who attacked me. And despite the fact that I almost died and I spent 30 days in a hospital with 33 stitches in my head, I got out and continued to sell drugs. And that's when things got a little bit crazy. I started moving larger and larger amounts, and Saskatoon is small. You're not going to be able to move like that for too long without things going bad for you. And I can remember when when it was really crazy, I was starting to have drones follow me around, and at first I thought it was maybe because I was so high, but then it turned out that no, drones really were following me around. And one night I came out of my house.
That's an actual thing?
It's an actual thing.
So maybe they were actually following me too? You maybe just
I don't know, Dan.
I think it's entirely possible, darling.
Really? Did you have a whole bunch of meth?
No, I had a whole bunch of copper.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And we also had the hazmat show up at our house.
Oh yes, we had the hazmat show up once too. Yeah. That's
Oh my God.
But that's not Nicole's story. That's my story. We'll tell that another day.
Yeah. I had the unfortunate nickname, the Meth Queen. So if that gives you any indication what was going on, it was no good. And
a couple of weeks ago, we had the opioid king of Fresno. We should introduce y'all.
So anyways, the point is they were following me, and one night I came out of my house and there was literally 8 cops outside. And they said, "Oh, Ms. Obrigavitch, we've been looking for you." And I said, "For what?"
Oh, you haven't. You say that to all the meth queens. Yeah.
So, I was just on the way to pick up, and I had a bunch of cash in my purse, and I think about a quarter pound of meth, something like that.
That's a lot.
And yeah, and I was on my way to pick up. I was going to drop it off and pick up more. And,
you were running low?
Yeah, right? So then I got taken down to the police station, and they went through my purse, and they found what I had, and yeah, that was it. So I got busted, and I got released on bail because I hadn't had a criminal record at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. And so I got on bail, and I had a curfew, and I got home, and I sat on my bed, and I literally felt exactly like I did when I got disbarred, because I was like, now what? That had sort of become my identity. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like, my career at the time, and because I needed ways and means to continue to use, I continued to sell drugs, and I just went right back to it. Probably also because there wasn't any other options for me. I had no other way to make money. I had no other way to pay my rent. I had no other way to survive. And so I continued to deal drugs and continued to use, and found out shortly after that I was pregnant. So I was like about 6.5 months pregnant, and I got arrested again. And while I was in prison or in jail at that point, I lost my baby, and I got released again to go to treatment, and I didn't go to treatment, and continued to deal drugs. And I really couldn't see any way out, and all these really horrible things had happened. I had an attempt on my life. I was almost murdered. I had been through all sorts of crazy situations where I'd been robbed. I've been assaulted, sexually assaulted. I lost a baby at 8.5 months pregnant. It just wasn't getting any better. And like I said at the very beginning, the last time the police came to get me, I was ready to go. I knew that I wanted out, and I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to get out.
Let's look at a few more comments. Let's see what we got here.
So Kelly Marintz, excuse me, would like to say that she's 5 months, 19 days sober today because of Nicole. You already know I love you.
Oh,
that's beautiful.
She wants me to say about 5 months.
About.
I love her too very much.
And Rebecca Riley with some words of encouragement. She says, so powerful. And sober now as well, with words of encouragement, says your authenticity is beautiful. Thank you. And our friend Tiffany Joy Payne says, you're an inspiration. So happy you are alive and well. And Lish5043 over on YouTube says, great story. You guys always have the best speakers and topics. I would agree.
We're also extremely humble.
And this is Nicole's second appearance on our platform, and we're so grateful for that because she does really have like an amazingly powerful story. And Beth Riley Long wants to know, were your children with you during the insanity of dealing?
My 2 younger children were not. My oldest child was. She lived with me until she was almost 19 years old, and she was around for all of that. And I do my best to make amends to her on a daily basis. Our relationship is really good now, and I was going to get to this piece about my kids a little bit. Once I got arrested and I went in that last time, I pled guilty just because I wanted to get it over with, and I knew that I needed to make changes. And so when I got into prison, something that I did was I started writing amends letters. I wasn't attached to any program at that point, except for I was going to NA in the institution, which was really helpful for me because the literature was really good. And I started, and I know that this is so cliche, but this is basically where I established my relationship with my creator, my higher power. I didn't have one in the past. I just basically had this huge spiritual vacuum that I was trying to fill with drugs and booze and toxic relationships because I didn't love myself and I didn't know how to. And so that's how I ended up in a marriage like that. And that's why I stayed as long as I did. That's why I drank as much as I did. And, it was just so bizarre to me that as soon as I established that relationship, that hole was gone. And I didn't have that same type of loneliness that I'd been carrying with me my whole life. So when I was in prison, I did get 3.5 years. I was sentenced to 3.5 years. And when I got to prison, I was very, very fortunate because I didn't end up in Edmonton Max. I ended up at the Okinawa Ochi Healing Lodge, which was an absolutely wonderful opportunity for me. It felt like home. It was like all the birch trees and everything. And there was elders there and ceremony, and it was amazing. And I wrote a lot of amends letters to my best friend, to my family, to my cousin, to my children. And it took some time because I think, people were just sick of my shit. I've been always sort of this toxic nightmare my whole life and causing all these problems and involved in always some sort of bullshit and drama, and pulled myself together for law school, and then I ended up almost in a worse. Well, I did end up in a worse situation than even before when I was a teenager. And so, I think that I was blessed in the fact that people did give me an opportunity to prove to them that I was really going to make some changes. So my 2 younger children were at my in-laws in Vernon, and I decided that I would get released to Kamloops because that was the closest federal halfway house for women. And I also knew that I needed some time and space from Saskatoon because I had this feeling and I felt like I didn't make enough changes to come back here safely. Mm-hmm. I felt like I would probably start dealing and probably start using again if I came back to community because I didn't feel strong enough in my recovery at that point. So I got released to Kamloops, and I repaired my relationships with my children, which is amazing to me that they welcome me back into their life, because I know, I caused a lot of pain for them. And in Kamloops, I was welcomed into the recovery community there, and I was doing really well while I was on parole, and I was going to meetings, and I had a sponsor, and then I sort of started slipping back into some old behaviors, and ended up relapsing at 33 months. But I was out for, I think, two and a half months, something like that. But I was, excuse my language, fucking miserable. I knew I had been in recovery long enough and had been clean long enough to know that that is what I wanted. And I think that the fact that I had established that spiritual connection with my creator, and I didn't have that same sort of spiritual vacuum, and also my relationship with my family and how they supported me through all of this, it brought me back to center. And I knew at that point that there was absolutely no situation on the planet that would be made better by me using drugs. And so I came back to Kamloops because I was not in Kamloops when I relapsed. Came back to Kamloops, and after about 6 months, I got a job with a community organization there that supports people with addiction and mental health issues. So I was doing some service with them, and then I got linked into Elizabeth Fry because I had been volunteering for them on and off since I was released from prison. And I got a job with Elizabeth Fry in Kamloops, and I attended lots of meetings, and I got myself an amazing sponsor who's still my sponsor today. And tomorrow I will be 53 months clean.
So did you work? Congratulations, by the way. So did you work the steps?
I sure the hell did. I did a set of steps.
So
it took me a really long time, though.
How long did it take you?
Oh my God. Okay, so it took me almost 4 years. It took me almost 4 years. Oh, but you can ask my sponsor about this. This is the thing.
Give us the number. We'll call him right now.
She's in Vietnam.
Oh,
She's in Vietnam right now. Her name is Sherry.
Yeah.
I felt like I marinated in those steps. I really did. Mm-hmm. It was interesting to me because the way that I did them, it was slow, but with every step, the lesson came. And I didn't take a 3-year cake, and everybody gave me shit about it because they were like, why aren't you taking a cake? I said, I don't think that I'm a really good example of, somebody that's working the program properly, is just because it's been taking me so long to do my steps. And a lot of people said to me, they're taking as long as they're supposed to take.
Yeah.
You're coming to meetings, you're in contact with your sponsor, you're of service. I did a lot of speaking, I spoke at Detox. I carried the message at work when I was working with people that were still struggling with addiction. I continued with 2 different organizations. I did some other volunteering in community, and it was that service piece, I think, that also helped me because it got me out of my own head. And I wanted the people that I worked with to know how you can make changes in your life and how you don't have to live like that. And I thought that at first that it would be really difficult for me to work with people that were still in active addiction, that it might be triggering to me. But it actually wasn't. It gave me inspiration to, talk about recovery openly, because before I started that job, I actually, and I think that this might be part of the reason why I relapsed, was I didn't really know what it was going to look like for me when I got out of prison, despite the fact that I had 2 university degrees, and despite the fact that I wasn't facing some of the same barriers that the women that I was incarcerated with did. I was still carrying a lot of shame around the fact that I had A, been disbarred, B, had such a serious drug problem, C, had been to prison, and I didn't tell people. I hid it, and I was working retail, I was making minimum wage, and I didn't feel good enough about myself and who I was, and I didn't know where I was going, and it was really quite liberating to me after my relapse when I was like, you know what? it's time to be transparent about this, and it's time to use your education and your experience combined with your lived experience and your strong desire to carry the message of recovery to other people and use that lived experience to help other people. And that's what I did.
Awesome.
And that's what I continue to do.
So before we get too far ahead here, let's go back to the steps for a minute. Where did the rubber really hit the road for you? Like, were there times when you were working those steps where you're like, had aha moments? Were there times that you really struggled with?
I think there was a few aha moments. I think that my spiritual awakening happened around step 4. Step 10 was really important for me as well, because it sort of entrenched, it allowed me to practice the steps, and it allowed me to practice my recovery. And I loved that every day that I would sit down and I would reflect on, my behaviors and what I had done during the day. But I still think that the most important thing for me is my step 1, and that ability to surrender. When I first came into recovery and I was first going to meetings, I didn't really understand what surrender meant. And I didn't really, despite the fact that I had a newfound faith, I didn't really understand how those two things work together. I thought that surrender just meant, you admit, you surrender that you can't use drugs. I didn't realize that it was going to be every freaking aspect of my life, that I would have to give everything over to my higher power. And as somebody who's a control freak, that part was really difficult for me. But then when I understood what it meant, when I seriously did the steps, because I did try to do the steps the first time that my first kick at the can, but I stopped at 4. 4 was it for me. And
so hang on. Let's talk about, so what is step 4? For anybody who might not know, because I'm sure some people don't.
I can't even remember off the top of my head now.
Okay,
what step 4 is.
It's I got you. It's searching and fearless and searching moral inventory.
Moral inventory. Yes, my moral inventory.
Yeah.
What was the question?
That's it. We answered it.
No, there was a question.
No.
There was a question before the question.
Well, we were talking about where the rubber hit the road for you during the steps and where you had challenges in the steps. And you said that step 4 and step 10, but I just wanted to back up and make sure that everyone knew what step 4 and step 10 was. Now, step 4 is a searching and fearless moral inventory, where you go through and you talk about your fears, your guilts, your resentments. There's sex. Hey, yeah. Your side of the street, right? You get and then step 10 is the maintenance. There's 10, 11, 12 are maintenance steps, right? So do you still practice step 10? Do you still, like, at the end of every day, do you still take an inventory?
Yeah, things are a little bit different for me in the way that I sort of have this ongoing dialogue with my higher power now. Instead of overthinking, I give it over probably about 40 times a day, because that's the only way that it works for me. And so, we have a lot of conversations, me and my creator. It's a good thing for me. And at the end of the day, I always reflect on my day and what I could have done better, what I did really well. And I think that that's important, to call yourself your bullshit, because that slipping into old behaviors was what led me into problems before. And it's something that's been crucial to me for sure.
So let's look at some more comments. We got a lot of comments coming in tonight. I just want to throw a shout out to the community. Thank you guys for all the comments. This is amazing.
Okay, so first up is our dear friend Onyx Knight. She says, it's awful how the system is flawed. The waiting for detox bed, then having to wait 6 months plus for rehab, only increases the chances of relapse. And you're back to using. It's a vicious cycle. And Mikey B Sobriety Project says, this is a great example of that hole you dig can get so dark and deep, it seems like there is no way out. What you're proving is that the shovel never leaves your hands. You can always find a way to start digging your way out. Beautiful words, Mikey. And Sydney Wouters says, so thankful for Nicole and her story. And Robin Christine says, so thankful for that organization that brought us together. And Sober Now says, she said something interesting about her relapse. The seed had been planted. You can't unlearn recovery once you connect with it. You may slip or go back out, but it's never the same because the seed for a better life is there. You just have to get back to doing the work. And she is proof. And our last comment here is Trevor Smallchild. He says, incorporating the step work, lived experience, along with education is helpful big time for those who need her support. Thank you.
It's awesome having Donna reading the comments, I gotta say. I've been struggling. I'm doing this for 2 years, and every time comments come up, I struggle with last names. I struggle with reading. If there's a typo, God help me. So Donna's like, just now, I'll do this.
Surrender down.
Yeah. And we did. Yay, here we are.
Okay. Faith.
Yeah. So, okay, you got through the steps. You mentioned that you did have a spiritual awakening. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, how that felt, and then we'll move on.
There's been a few times just since I came back from my relapse, and I just, if you don't mind, I'd like to touch on that just for a minute.
Yeah.
When I relapsed, there was a whole lot of guilt and shame attached to that, and I honestly, it felt like I was grieving something, the fact that I had 33 months in, and I was really proud of the fact that I had stayed in recovery for that long, and was really just really angry with myself that I had reverted back to old behaviors. And relapsed. It was very, very upsetting to me. And when I came back into the rooms, it was humiliating a little bit, but my recovery community welcomed me back, and that made it so much better for me. I can remember the first meeting I went back, and they asked at the beginning, if you've got a year clean, put your hand up. And I went to put my hand up, and I couldn't. And when I got that first year clean, when I came back, I was just so freaking happy to be able to put my hand up again. And then they changed it. They were like, put your hand up if you have done a set of steps with the sponsor.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Oh, so that was a little bit of motivation for me to get through those damn steps.
Yeah,
but,
God damn it.
but yeah, the spiritual awakening for me came over time, because it was just during basically I knew when things were being done right for myself. It would be those quiet times when I was taking a walk in nature, or I was standing on a treadmill, where I would just get goosebumps, and I would just feel like everything was right. Like I just knew that no matter what the hell happened, that I would be able to deal with it, and that my higher power would be there to help me deal with it, and that everything was going to be okay. And there was times in the last few years where things were kind of messed up, or I was broke, or I had things going on, and I was struggling a little bit. But I am absolutely blessed in respect to my recovery community that I've surrounded myself with, not only in the rooms and in Kamloops, but also on social media. I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but I've taken a positive.
It's not. There is an amazing recovery community. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've met some of my bestest friends on Instagram. It's nuts. So that, and in combination with the fact that I had all these really great supports in Kamloops that knew what I had been through, knew that I had my kids taken away, knew that I'd been disbarred, knew that I was in an abusive relationship, knew that I had been to prison, and they loved me anyways. And I think that that's made all the difference for me, and it's allowed me to be open about my story, and it's allowed me to make moves professionally to help other people, not only as a nonprofit organization, but also as an individual. And all I want to do is just let people know that it doesn't matter how bad it gets, that you can come back from that. And I also want people to know that it can freaking happen to anybody. I don't care if you're a doctor. I don't care if you're a lawyer. I don't care if you've got 2 degrees or 8 degrees or a PhD or whatever. There's just so much stigma about what being an addict looks like. And I think that, people need to realize that it's just one bad experience or one horrible thing away. Coping, we do the best that we can as humans, and avoiding pain is something that we do. And it was told to me in mental health first aid, and this was a big aha moment for me. The person told me that physical pain and mental pain are the same, and your brain can't differentiate. And that made a lot of sense to me, because I spent a lot of my relationship in like extreme emotional pain, and using drugs to cope and using alcohol to cope was all that I knew. I had very poor emotional management skills, and when I relapsed, it was a situation around that as well. And now I know that walking through the pain is something that I can do, and it's something that I've learned from.
So tell us a little bit. So you've moved into some really meaningful service positions. Tell us how your lived experience, and maybe even if you've got like a circumstance or specifically that stood out to you over your career, where your lived experience has been an asset in helping someone else.
I started volunteering with Elizabeth Fry in Kamloops. And Kamloops Elizabeth Fry is a little bit different than Elizabeth Fry in Saskatoon, in that they don't really provide services for criminalized women, although I think that that's something that they would like to do. It's just not something that they have been historically doing. So they got a new ED about 4 years ago, and 4 years ago, and she wanted to be linked in with the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies, and she didn't have a lot of experience around criminalized women. And so she actively poached me from the other nonprofit organization that I was working for because of my lived experience.
We need a hardened criminal.
That was pretty, but this is the funny thing about me, though. I have been to prison, yes, but I don't think that I'm truly representative of the women that we serve. I think that they face far more barriers than I do. I think that there's privilege that I have that unfortunately that these other women don't, and I recognize that. And so I feel like it's my responsibility to act a bit as a bridge, as somebody that has that lived experience, but also can translate some of those things that people might not understand. And I have a little bit of credibility because of my education. I've been asked to speak at the Judges Conference in BC in May, the Provincial Judges Conference. And that's something that I'm really going to focus on, is, the fact that, it can happen to anybody. It happened to me, and I'm coming from a place of privilege. Let's think about these people that didn't have the opportunities that I had. And, I think that there needs to be a lot more compassion and empathy for people that are just coping the best that they know how. And there's just not the services out there that we need to support the people that are hurting the most.
So what are you doing now?
I took a position on February 13th as the executive director of Elizabeth Fry in Saskatchewan. And I'm so happy to be here, because I was released in Kamloops and I did a lot of service in Kamloops, but that's not my community. This is my community. And this is the community that I did a lot of damage to when I was selling drugs. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for me to come back to community and do my best to give back in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, both Donna and I were frankly delighted to hear when we heard that you were moving into that position. Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan has been an amazing supporter of this platform. Surely we wouldn't be where we are today without them. So when we heard that our friend Nicole was coming to step in there, we were very, very grateful to hear it. So we're glad you're here. So.
Well, and it felt like there really wasn't many people that would be better suited for that role.
Yeah.
You know, like you have such a varied experience, lived as well as education and professional experience. Like you are just such a valuable person to this cause.
And the funny thing is that when I was sitting around a table, and they said, we've got someone stepping in. And I'm like, who is it? Like, well, we can't tell you, but it's a lawyer from BC. I'm like, it's Nicole. And they're like, you know Nicole? So yeah, it was funny. Let's look at a few more comments, then we'll have some final thoughts, see if you want to leave us with anything. And then, yeah, we'll put a cap on it.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to mention that since the segue into you coming to Elizabeth Fry, the comments have been blowing up. I can't even keep up with the thumbs up or the likes or whatever. So lots of amens. So proud of you. You know, just on and up. Bravo. Yeah, they're still going. I can't even read them. They're coming up so fast. So let's start with ones that aren't moving. This one is from Biscuits McVander Savage. Love the name.
Man, you are so much better at names than I am. I was given anxiety by that. Like.
And he says, I appreciate you sharing your story open and honestly. Your story is inspiring. Thank you. And just so you know, the comments are still going off on out of my peripheral here. Trevor Smallchild says, she is definitely a beautiful soul. Proud of all the work she has done. Good work. And Sober Now, this is in relation to the conversation about, you know, online recovery. It says, some of my closest friends are through online recovery. It's a beautiful thing, the unity available to us these days.
Sober Now is actually going to be donating some books to us to give away.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, she's releasing a book soon.
Awesome. That's exciting.
I think. I hope I'm allowed to say that, actually.
It's a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
And Kumara Nagawa says, keep saving lives. And Trevor Smallchild says, Superwoman. And again, I've still got on my peripheral messages just blowing by, like, incredible story. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. So lots of support out there for you, Nicole, and we're all super proud of you.
Okay, so is there anything that you'd like to leave us with tonight?
I really appreciate you having me on the show tonight, and I'm really looking forward to being in community and trying to figure out where the gaps are and continuing to do work, basically supporting people that need recovery. And we know that there are so many, and you know, it's basically my goal to you know, continue to make amends to community to the best of my ability, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, my friend. Well, you got anything to say?
I don't. Aside from not only are the comments continuing to scroll so fast I can't read, the hearts, like I've never seen it, the chat blow up with hearts like this before. Like it's just insane. It's wild. Sorry, wrong choice of words.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to bring you back again so people can finish blowing the chat up another time. All right, my friend. Well, we will let you go. Thank you so much for coming tonight and sharing your experience and strength and hope and all of the things. We very much look forward to seeing you do your good work in our community here in Saskatoon and beyond. But for now, take care, my friend. We'll see you again.
Wait. I just got to squeak one in here.
Okay.
Jocelyn Tracci says, can't be more happier. You're our boss. I think if E-Fry wins the shirt, she's angling for the, like, you know, the first choice on that.
No, we're throwing it in the door. Y'all scrap it out. That's how this is going down. Ain't no friends when it comes to shirts. Okay. We're going to put a cap on it. It was great seeing you, Nicole. Take care.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Okay. If you love what we're doing here, All right, if you're getting something out of what we're doing here, you can find us on all audio platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or live and interactive right here on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching. Take care, my friends.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.